how are you adjusting to all this quarantine era implications?
I'm reasonably fortunate in that, high energy physics already had much of the infrastructure for doing this kind of work in place. So we knew how to use Zoom, and we had the Indico scheduling system in place from CERN. So much of the infrastructure that was used for this conference was already being used in a somewhat casual way by our field. And so for us, it wasn't such a horrible transition. And so we have been able to be a real resource for other fields of science in taking their courses online. I would say this was not that big an adjustment for most of us. It's not great. I would much rather be in Prague, but it's something that we've figured out how to do. And it was partially because we already had pretty good infrastructure due to the international collaboration.
When did the idea for organizing the conference in Prague emerge? Maybe Professor Horejsi.
If I remember correctly, it was in 2013, and it was sort of a collective decision of the particle physics community here in Czech Republic. We had a general meeting, and of course, even before that, there was some unofficial discussion concerning this ambitious plan of organizing such a big conference. But then, during this meeting of Czech particle physicists, there was a decision that we will take it seriously. In 2014, at the ICHEP conference in Valencia, I had the privilege of being a member of C11 committee. I had the privilege to present there the first very preliminary information about our intention to organize such a conference. And then in 2016, there was a conference, the ICHEP conference in Chicago, and there was the decisive moment, voting, and we had a very serious rival or competitor, Edinburgh, which really was a heavyweight, of course, and we won. So the decision was made in 2016. But of course, at the time, we did not expect that we will be the first to organize this huge conference online.
So when was that decision made that it will move from in-person to?
I will say that I think there was a bit of a personal element here, in that I personally have collaborated with the Czech institutes on distributed computing since the early 2000s, on the D0 experiment and now on the Dune neutrino experiment. And I have always been incredibly impressed with the capabilities. It's not the largest group in those experiments, but it's almost always among the most competent and reliable. So I had great faith, probably to some extent, maybe more than Zdeněk did, in the technical abilities of the group in Prague to pull this off. You know, it was a difficult decision, but the alternative was to just not have the conference. And I must say what they finally managed to pull off was more ambitious than we had envisioned at the start. They were able to build up capacity more than we thought. We thought it would be somewhat bare bones. It's much less bare bones than we originally expected.
So what would you say are the main things your field or scientific field in general gets out of meeting in a conference? So what would you say are the main things your field or scientific field in general gets out of meeting in a conference, and what of that can be salvaged in an online and what can't?
Some things have worked better than in a in-person conference. The talks, I think, go essentially the same way. You're staring at somebody on a podium and staring at a screen actually turns out to not be that different an experience. And we have had speakers video in to previous conferences when they were unable to attend. Positive is that something like 2 to 3 times as many people have been able to participate. One of the things about C11 is that it used to be just Europe and America, but we now have representatives from Brazil and South Africa and India who often do not have the funds to come to large international conferences. And they have reacted very positively to this format, which allows people from their institutes to attend the meeting without a very large expense that they can no longer afford. What we've missed is the interaction.
Precisely, I simply miss the personal communication because I attended several conferences like that before, and of course, the best asset of this is personal contact with various people and so on. But otherwise, I think that it is really a progress in the number of participants. There are no visa problems, no problems with reservation for accommodation. Those practical matters are simply out. For the future, I think that I would not prefer to follow this path. So if it is possible to organize the next conference in persona, I would simply prefer this because this personal contact is quite important.
Your field is particularly dependent on cooperation.
I would just like to sort of highlight the importance of CERN being an international body, which has a long history of promoting international collaboration. You know, there are similar labs in the United States, but they're not as international. And I have given talks about the history of CERN in the US. And, you know, the World Wide Web came out of CERN, and they try to make things, they have a real tradition of openness. The World Wide Web software was given away for free. They've been highly supportive of this in other conferences. So there's this sort of monument of European scientific collaboration, which has managed to influence the rest of us to, I think, behave in a good way. And in our field, being overly individualistic is considered kind of a bad thing in ways that it might not be in other fields. So most people are selected for being reasonably cooperative. And I think it has worked very well here.
So is the role of a conference to sort of clash every now and then to see what other people are thinking? Otherwise you would be thinking, oh, everyone is on the same page as I am.
I think the role of the conference is more for very smart people to, in many cases, summarize. People often will save up their best results for this conference. This is where you do the first presentation, but now people often post the paper on the archive a couple days beforehand, so we actually know what they're going to say. But you need to have exceptional speakers to really clarify the important issues, because these results are now very complicated. Our experiments are huge, they're complicated, they take years to run. And the plenary speakers somehow have to take a very, very complex subject and boil it down to its most important parts. And that's what I look forward to seeing, is more the clarification of the 40-page paper I just read to make me understand what the gist of it was. You know, one of the highlights of the conferences is that we award medals to 2 promising young scientists. We have the Young Scientist Awards, and those will be given on Tuesday in a session that will be in the evening in Europe and the morning for me. And we always look forward to those because they give excellent talks.
What is the thing that moved you towards particle physics? Because you're saying it's difficult and complicated. You had to be an outsider and became an insider. So what moved you in the direction?
When I was a child, my parents got the magazine Scientific American, and I read all the articles in it, starting when I was perhaps 12 years old. But I remember asking when I was 13, asking my professor in class, my teacher in class, he said, the lightest particle is the electron. And I said, what about the neutrino? And he would glare at me because I had read about it in Scientific American. But I would say the thing that really got me going was the realization that, at least in physics, mathematics can really describe the universe. It's to a physicist, the universe actually isn't that chaotic. We can look at a problem and we can, you know, generally you can figure out what some of the equations that will allow you to predict and understand it is. And I think it's a different worldview than many people have. We at least have the assumption that we can describe the universe in reasonably simple terms. It doesn't always work, and sometimes we do stupid things because we're overly confident, but I'd say that was the real thing, is taking both mathematics and physics in college. I started out as a mathematician, and to realize that mathematics works to describe the universe was a very big thing for me.
I, as a schoolboy at the beginning of 60s in the last century, it was a sort of romantic feeling about the discipline, because it was very intriguing problem to know what is inside atom and so on. But then I came closer to mathematics, and I was fascinated by those mysterious symbols of integrals and differentials and so on. I also saw that I will stay with the mathematics, and that I will proceed simply with mathematics. But then I returned to theoretical physics, and I have never regretted that. So I think that I've chosen the right way, because now we are much farther than we were then. And of course, this field is still fascinating, knowing what are the basic building blocks of the universe and so on.
So
definitely.
I started out, I got interested by my classes and the mathematics, but then I actually joined an experimental particle physics group. And at that point, you get all these great toys. They're not really toys because they're the size of a house, but is actually getting to play around and build experimental equipment was a revelation to me, and also access to the computing power that we have. So that was later. I got into the field for the mathematics, but then I discovered these wonderful tools that we could use and the fun of building them with a large number of other people. And that is a very great thing, is that experimental physics is a huge amount of fun most of the time.
Large Hadron Collider, I imagine you would describe as a toy?
Yeah. It's a many toys perhaps, but the oscilloscopes, the ability to build it yourself, that is a big thing. As high energy physicists cannot just call up and order something. We have to build it from scratch. Almost everything we do is the first time anybody's done something that big or powerful or small. And so we have to design the device and then build it ourselves. And that it's riskier, but in the end it seems to work, and you have a real feeling of accomplishment that you actually built the thing. That's one of the reasons we have to be cooperative. These experiments, you turn on the LHC, it takes 2 to 3 months to cool the LHC down to the temperature it needs to run the magnets. So it takes many months to start these things. And once you've started them, you run them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for months on end. And so people have to staff it all of those hours. There's many people when the LHC is running, there's many people in the control rooms at all hours of the day and night. So in fact, we take data for extended period of times and we have to analyze the data. The individual interactions may take a nanosecond, but we record 10,000 of them per second, and then we have to do something with them later. So yes, there are huge data centers at CERN and at Fermilab full of robots with thousands of tapes and very large data stores that we have to sift through afterwards. So at any given time, there's maybe 200,000 or 300,000 computers, or at least CPUs worldwide, working away to analyze the data from one of these high energy physics experiments.